My name is John Beynon. I'm in the English department. I've been here for 11 years. And the remarks I prepared really are in the form of a story. A kind of story of my life or my coming to politics. I was asked to speak to you about why students should be interested in the Occupy movement. What connections there are between what students are doing here at Fresno State and what's happening down at Courthouse Park in downtown Fresno, at Occupy Fresno, and at other Occupy sites all over the country. And I want to come at that in a roundabout way, like I said, by telling a personal story, a narrative, and then hopefully bringing that to bear on those issues. In the early 90s, as an English major at the University of Utah, I was, like many of you are now, struggling to fulfill my general education requirements. One of the courses that met a requirement and fit my schedule was a course in the sociology of gender. I hadn't been all that interested or even aware of women's studies courses, but it ended up being one of the most exciting and meaningful classes I had taken up to that point. I enrolled in other women's studies courses, and I declared a minor in women's studies. One of the reasons that first women's studies course resonated with me so much is that I was also beginning to reconsider how categories of gender and sexuality operated in my own life. I was then coming out as a young gay man in Salt Lake City, Utah. And these courses in gender and sexuality offered me opportunities to contextualize my personal experiences. I sought out other folks in my situation, and I discovered and joined a gay and lesbian student group, much like the one here at Fresno State, United Student Pride, hoping to make some friends and find opportunities to socialize. It soon became clear, however, that some of these friends were also politically active. They were very politically active. Some of them had organized Salt Lake City chapter of Queer Nation, a grassroots, direct action political movement committed to fighting homophobia and heterosexism in all its forms whenever it surfaced. I didn't think I was ready for that. I had just gotten used to saying gay. Now I was being invited to embrace the more politically charged term queer. And I wasn't very comfortable with the direct action tactics that I knew that they engaged in. But I did become involved in Queer Nation, and eventually I helped produce the group's nationally distributed zine. I noisily demonstrated at a local Denny's restaurant that had refused to serve a lesbian couple. I helped post stickers and posters throughout the city. And eventually, with another Queer Nation member, I co-founded Utah's first chapter of ACT UP, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And we successfully lobbied against an HIV testing law that would have discriminated against sex workers. These opportunities also allowed me to learn about and participate in other organizations as well. I was having a great time, but more importantly, I was complementing my studies in extraordinarily meaningful ways. One day, I was reading a history of the Vietnam War. The next, I was participating in a protest march against the first U.S. invasion of Iraq. One day, I was discussing a complicated example of feminist theory. The next, I was at a pro-choice rally at the state capitol building. Far from distracting me from my studies, my involvement in political organizations deepened my understanding of what I was learning about in class. I was putting ideas to the test by embodying them through political action. In short, I was not only thinking, I was doing. But like all golden eras, this one came to an end. Clinton was elected, and we thought all our problems were about to be solved. were on the verge of witnessing universal health care for all Americans. We were going to witness a sweeping dismantling of legally enshrined homophobia, and we would witness a new era in which social goods such as public education took precedence over corporate interests and aggressive military ventures. Obviously, these visions never materialized, but it took many of us a long time to realize that we can't count on elected leaders beholden to big money to represent our best interests. And in that era, I became disillusioned, cynical, lazy. Fast forward to November of this year, when my good friend and colleague, Catherine Forbes of Women's Studies, pestered me to visit Occupy Fresno at Courthouse Park in downtown Fresno. I will admit that at first I was reluctant to go. I long come to consider my time as an activist to be over. But what I saw at Occupy Fresno was exciting. In fact, I would say that Occupy movement constitutes the single most promising grassroots direct action movement I've seen in a couple of decades. I've since been visiting and participating in Occupy Fresno for some weeks, not as actively as many of the occupiers for sure. But I participated in general assemblies, in protests, and in nonviolent civil disobedience. And it's been exhilarating and meaningful. So to get back to the reason I was invited to speak to you today, there are two main reasons I feel Fresno State students should be more aware and involved in Occupy Fresno. One is my own story illustrates community organizing and political action can only complement and deepen your intellectual pursuits as college students. I can promise you that your education will be even more meaningful if you find yourself directly engaged in the world in which you live, seeking to bring about real and meaningful change by living a vision of the world that your studies are helping you to envision. Second, my experience as a student at a public university differs from yours in at least one very crucial way. I got my degrees, all three of them, at public universities at a time when those universities still enjoyed a relatively healthy degree of support from political leaders and from those charged with leading those institutions. This is no longer the case. Wall Street has not only sold out Main Street, but today's titans of industry are also actively working to dismantle our great systems of higher education. You know the increased costs of getting a degree, more student debt, fewer sections, larger class sizes, less institutional support. Public education employees are being falsely assigned the blame for the current financial crisis, while the 1% refuse to pay their fair share to fund higher education. The Occupy movement seeks to draw attention to the current economic inequities that have been widening the gap between the rich and the poor for the last 3 decades. And as the movement comes to college and university campuses, these concerns become directly tied to crises in education and to the many ways in which students and instructors, staff and librarians all have an investment in reoccupying America and making good on this country's commitment to equal opportunity and social justice. Members of Occupy Fresno have been supportive of student and faculty events like the Defend Your Education Rally and the California Faculty Association's informational picket this past November. So I would invite you to go down to Courthouse Park this week, introduce yourself, participate in a General Assembly to happen every day at 6 o'clock. Participate in whichever way you can. But this is a meaningful way in which you can defend your education, deepen your education, and occupy your education. Thank you.